Hi there, Christina here. Thanks for checking in. Today I'm going to do a book review of Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Now this book is in two parts. The first half is written all about his experiences and observations while in a concentration camp in the 1930s during World War II. And then the second half of the book is all about logotherapy or logotherapy. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Basically, the book starts in talking about that we do not always have a choice in what happens to us or doesn't happen to us in life, but we do always have a choice of how we are going to feel and respond about what happens to us. We can't always choose the situation, but we can always choose the attitude we have about the situation. Right away, you can really probably imagine that there was a great deal of suffering in these concentration camps and in people going through this time. And he said that if the prisoners weren't consciously aware of their thinking, that they would automatically be sucked into depression and grief and really negative, being in a really negative space. He described suffering as a gas filling a container, and it fills that container completely evenly and all included. And just as that gas in the container is suffering in a man's soul and conscious thoughts. And one quote that was throughout the entire book was by Nietzsche, and it was saying how that if a man has a big enough why, he can get through any how, meaning that if a man has a big enough reason to persevere, that he can get through any of the details of how to get there. And one way that they were able to get through their situation was by digging in their inner strength. They would focus on a loved one or someone that they needed to return to take care of, or returning to a career that they had, or some sort of job or future task that they wanted to do. When Viktor was taken into Auschwitz, his manuscript was confiscated by the guards, and he spent a lot of his time in camp trying to recreate this manuscript. He would write it on bits of papers and garbage that he could find and gather. And he said that at one point he did a lot of visualizing about being in a theater, Coliseum, where he was a teacher and explaining and telling others about his experience and helping others. And so he was very focused on having a future task, a future goal. Another way that they were able to rise above the suffering was by tapping into humor, which I found surprising. I would not have expected there to be anything to be humorous in a concentration camp. Viktor said that using humor, we can rise above any situation, even if only for a moment or two. So a couple of the things that they would kind of joke about is, I guess the Nazis, when they were yelling at them to get busy, would yell, "Action, action!" And so one of the jokes was imagining if they were back home and their boss ran into the room yelling at them, "Action, action!" to get busy, and how ridiculous that would be. And another joke that they kind of had was, imagine when we're home and we're at a dinner party and we beg the hostess to scoop from the bottom, because they're being fed mainly watery soup, and they would beg the guards to scoop from the bottom so they could get a potato or peas or whatnot. Another way that they were able to rise above the suffering was by noticing the beauty. He said that there was a few mornings when he was out doing work duties that they were able to witness the sunrise and just the contrast of the amazing, beautiful sky to the the death and the pain all around them, that was something they were able to focus on. A few things that I didn't even consider was, he said that there was a lot of grumpiness in the camp because caffeine and nicotine withdrawals. And I had not considered that. I can't imagine being in that situation and then also having to go through withdrawal of my morning coffee or cigarettes if I was a smoker. I think that would be very difficult. Another thing I had not considered was, he said that some of the prisoners were given kind of extra duties and a little bit of maybe a bit of a role. And often those prisoners were more cruel and mean than the Nazis themselves. And I found that kind of shocking as well. And another thing he mentioned, that he found out years later, that one of the Nazis in one of the camps he was at, he spent a great deal of his own money on medical supplies and food for his prisoners, because he felt like they were his prisoners and he wanted to take care of them, which I thought was kind of a neat thing. Another thing I had not considered at all was the returning of the survivors to their life. He said they encountered a lot of sadness. They discovered that their loved ones had been lost, and they had awkward interactions with their neighbors. I guess a lot of people just pretended they didn't know what was going on and didn't want to talk about it, and basically pleaded ignorance, and that was tremendously frustrating for those folks at that time. And I could sort of imagine, not to any way am I comparing my experience to that of these survivors in the concentration camps, but I have gone through a great deal of suffering in the recent years, having been in a major car accident. And as I was getting better, returning, I had the same sort of situation where the people that once knew me didn't know me the same way, and there was just life has been different, that's for sure, since experiencing something so major. So I can only begin to imagine what it was like for those folks. So the second half of the book was all about logotherapy or logotherapy. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but it's a type of therapy that asks questions and does a lot of recontextualizing, rather than diving into dissecting the past, which traditional therapy is more a fan of. In logotherapy, it encourages people to choose a productive, positive future for themselves, and then to set about doing making choices and doing tasks that are productive and follow in that direction. And it also encourages us to be accountable for our decisions and actions along the way, which I thought was quite great. I kind of wonder what my life would have been like had I been introduced to logotherapy many years ago, because I have spent a fair decent amount of time in traditional therapy, and yeah, it would have been interesting to see how things would have shaken up if I had been introduced to logotherapy instead. Basically, in summary of this book, I think that we can recognize that man's attitude is really going to shape man's life, and we can always choose our attitude. People who choose a positive attitude are often going to experience life better. They are going to be able to handle disappointments and situations better. They are going to have just an overall better quality and better outlook on life. Whereas people with a negative attitude, they are likely to encounter negative situations, and being that they have a negative attitude, are going to have limited options. And even further down the line, if you have a negative attitude long enough, you might even run into health problems. So yeah, just overall, man's meaning in his life, or woman, can be discovered by asking ourselves the right questions, and making the right choices and following through in that direction. Also, the meaning for life is going to be different for every man, and might often be different at different phases of their life. When you're 20 years old, the meaning of your life is often going to be a lot different looking than when you're 50 years old, for example. Yeah, so I guess that would be about it. I would love to hear if you have read this book as well and what you thought of it. I'd love to hear if you got any light bulb moments like I did. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in and watching this video. And I look forward to chatting with you on the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye.